Welcome back to Pokemon episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 214, Taking It on the Chinchou. The episode begins with Ash and the gang riding a cable car that was supposed to be taking them to Bluefinland, and from Bluefinland, they would then go to Yellow Rock Isle on a ferry. Ash and the gang were already talking about how they were going to get to Yellow Rock Isle, but they shouldn't have got ahead of themselves, as the speaker on the cable car then announced that the destination that it was currently heading towards was actually another town called Blue Lagoon, clarifying that Blue Lagoon was known for its lake, which was in a crater surrounded by forests and the buildings. When Misty hears this, she hurriedly states that they were actually heading to the wrong destination, and states that Ash should have known better, saying that it was his fault they were in this mess as they arrived at Blue Lagoon. As Misty yelled at Ash, Ash tried to get Brock to defend him, but Brock understood Misty's frustrations and only made Misty more frustrated as he reminded her that if they ended up missing the next ferry in Bluefinland after getting stranded in Blue Lagoon, then they'd have to wait another 3 days for another one. With Brock and Misty both against him, Ash tried to get them off his back by promising to get them out of this situation, and stated that he would try and find a way out of Blue Lagoon. Just then, Ash and the gang see a Pokemon that they had never seen before come up to them and begin walking around. Ash was curious as to what it was, so he pulled out his Pokedex, which revealed that it was called a Chinchou, a water Pokemon. Upon learning its typing, as you can imagine, Misty instantly wanted to catch this Chinchou and add it to her team so that she could further prove that she was a water Pokemon expert. So she threw a Pokeball at it, but unfortunately, the Pokeball bounced right off, which surprised Misty because she thought that the Chinchou would go in since it seemed distracted. Misty goes to try again, only for her to be interrupted this time by a boy who yells the name Bright, and also yells at Misty, warning her not to catch whoever this Bright was. He was referring to the Chinchou. Before Misty can try and throw another Pokeball, the boy runs up to Chinchou, although Chinchou runs away, leading the boy to chase it, continuously calling out Bright some more, insinuating that that must have been its name. Unfortunately, the Chinchou was too fast for the boy, and the boy became very frustrated at this, leading Ash to realize that the boy likely wanted to retrieve the Pokemon that seemed to be his, so he decided to help him and cut the Chinchou off so that it couldn't run any further as he ran around the other way. This stops the Chinchou in its tracks, so Ash tries to grab it by its tentacles, only for the Chinchou to defend itself by using Spark on Ash, electrocuting him. However, with the Chinchou occupied by unleashing this Spark attack, this allowed the boy to run up to his Chinchou once again and grab it, and demand that the Chinchou apologize to Ash for electrocuting him. However, Ash assures the boy that he was fine, stating that it was his fault because he shouldn't have grabbed Chinchou's tentacles, since that was clearly a sensitive area of it. The boy apologizes anyway, and explains that the Chinchou, named Bright, was in fact his, and introduces himself as Dayton. Ash and the gang introduced themselves back, stating that they were trainers traveling the World Islands, awaiting the World Cup, specifying that they were currently on their way to Bluefinland, but had gotten lost. Very excited to see some potential World Cup competitors in person, Dayton offers to lead Ash and the gang to Bluefinland, stating that he was going there anyways for an event known as the Parade of Chinchou, suggesting that Ash and the gang come with him to the parade to check it out before attending to their actual business at Bluefinland, clarifying that the parade was taking place on a mountain. Ash and the gang inquire if the reason why Dayton was going to the Chinchou parade had to do with his own Chinchou, with Dayton confirming. Ash and the gang then further question if Dayton's Chinchou knew the location of the mountain and if it could lead them to it, with Dayton also confirming this, leading Ash to go up to the Chinchou and congratulate it on being so useful, only for the Chinchou to use Spark on Ash again, as punishment for Ash getting close to it, as it was frightened. Meanwhile, Team Rocket, wearing their Black Arachnid disguises from the Black Arachnid Spin Rack episode, were spying on Ash and the gang, debating what the Chinchou parade could entail, only to notice Ash get shocked by the Chinchou. Upon seeing this, Jessie remarked how she was happy that Ash got a taste of his own medicine, and decided that, because of the Chinchou's spark, she now wanted to capture Chinchou for herself, stating that she wanted it not only because it was cute and adorable, but because she could use it to counter Ash and the gang. James and Meowth agreed with Jessie that they also wanted the Chinchou. However, they wanted to use the Chinchou for Christmas lights, which caused Jessie to get mad at them and smack them with her fan, stating that they should come up with a more serious reason, like her. Wobbuffet then comes out of its Pokeball, although it immediately tries to return when it sees how mad Jessie was. Meanwhile, back with Ash and the gang, on their way to the mountain where the Chinchou parade was going to take place. They first arrived at Blue Lagoon's main town, not just its port that they were at previously. At the town, there was an entire festival going on, meant to hype up the upcoming Chinchou parade, essentially being a precursor to the main event. There were posters everywhere of Chinchou parading on the nearby mountain, which made Ash realize how out of place the Chinchou looked on the mountain, being a water Pokemon, stating that they should be in the water instead. This leads Ash to go to the Pokemon Center in town and call Professor Oak to see if he knew why the Chinchou were so well equipped on land as opposed to in the water, specifically liking mountains so much, thinking that Oak may have known about the history of the place thanks to his Pokemon research. Thankfully, Oak did, as he picked up the call and informed Ash and the gang, showing them a diagram, that the Chinchou in the Whirl Islands did used to originate from the water. However, that was only when the Whirl Islands were still part of the seafloor before they were actually risen up into actual islands by geological forces, clarifying that the mountain at Blue Lagoon rose up at the same time as the Whirl Islands themselves, forming the lagoon in the process, as the mountain's crater trapped the water. Ash and the gang butted in, questioning what all this had to do with the Chinchou liking the mountain, leading Oak to go on, explaining that when the mountain rose up from the seafloor and created the lagoon, the Chinchou were currently on the mountain that was still part of the seafloor, and once they came up, they realized that they were now on a mountain technically, so therefore they took a liking to the mountain, and made it their nesting grounds, along with the rest of the lagoon in general. However, the Chinchou knew that just because the seafloor had risen up to become a mountain didn't mean that they belonged on the mountain, knowing that they still belonged in the water. So, they immediately returned to the water upon realizing this, although the Chinchou had already laid their eggs at the mountain by this point. So eventually, the Chinchou in those eggs were born on the mountain, and they had a natural instinct to return to the water as well, so they did. However, they laid their eggs on the mountain first as well, and eventually this turned into a tradition with the Chinchou as the centuries went on, with the Chinchou believing that they were supposed to lay their eggs at the mountain first and then return to the ocean. Dayton, being a local of Blue Lagoon, states that what Oak had said was true, clarifying that the entire purpose of the Chinchou parade was so that all of the Blue Lagoon townsfolk could get together to watch the Chinchou return to the ocean after having laid their eggs. Further explaining that the parade happened every year, since every year, even though the Chinchou would return to the ocean, they of course had laid their eggs, so new Chinchou would come and have to return to the ocean every year. Oak then hangs up, having explained all he needed to, as Dayton reveals that this year the parade would be extra special, since him and his father Daiso were going to be leading it. Dayton then decides to introduce Ash and the gang to his father, who was currently at the festival preparing for the parade, explaining that he wanted to get his father's permission before he let Ash and the gang join the parade, stating that it was usually only Blue Lagoon residents that were allowed to attend. When Ash and the gang and Dayton go to Daiso, he was skeptical to let Ash and the gang join. However, Ash stated that he would help with the parade if necessary, which led Daiso to agree that Ash and the gang could join the parade, confirming that the parade involved the leaders of the parade guiding the Chinchou to the ocean to make sure they got there safely, and stated that Ash and the gang would have to help with this. Soon enough, it was time for the parade of Chinchou to begin, as Dayton and his father, along with Ash and the gang, went to a pier and waited there. This pier being located right by the lagoon, which was where the Chinchou were currently staying, being where they preferred to stay while they were on the mountain, insinuating that even when they were on the mountain, they still liked to be in the water in some way, which was probably how they came to the conclusion that they needed to return to the ocean in the first place. Dayton's father, Daiso, then blew on a whistle to summon the Chinchou from the lagoon, and this worked, as the Chinchou then activated their lights as the lake began to glow. The glow gets so close and so bright as the Chinchou swim across the lagoon, and this alerts the rest of the townsfolk that the Chinchou were about to come out, so all of the townsfolk gather by the pier as well, and wait excitedly as they make the area more festive by beating drums and shouting with joy, wanting to encourage the Chinchou to come out. Eventually, the Chinchou do come out when they get close enough to the land, and are further intrigued by not only the whistle, but also Dayton's Chinchou Bright, flashing its antenna at them, activating the light of its own. Getting the Chinchou attracted to Bright's light was just as Dayton had planned, as now the Chinchou would surely not get lost on their way to the ocean, since they would be trailing Bright's light. Just to make sure nothing went awry on the journey, though, Dayton, his father, and Ash and the gang, of course, still joined the Chinchou on their journey, with Dayton joining his Chinchou Bright at the front of the line that had been formed by the Chinchou, and Dayton's father, along with Ash and the gang, watching the back. Dayton and Bright eventually lead all of the Chinchou out of the town, but not before a lot of the townsfolk wave goodbye to the Chinchou and splash water over them, which the Chinchou were very grateful for, as this water would give them energy and stop them from drying out during the journey to the ocean. After exiting the town, Ash and the gang, Daiso, Dayton, and all the Chinchou encounter their first obstacle, being a raggedy-looking rope bridge. The entire line is stopped here, as Bright stops, since it didn't want to go across the bridge, believing it to be dangerous. Ash informs Dayton of this, leading Dayton to give Bright some words of encouragement, assuring him that there was nothing to fear with the bridge. These words were enough to motivate Bright, so it begins going across the bridge with Dayton, Ash and gang, Daiso, and all of the other Chinchou following, and eventually, when they make it across the bridge, they spot a water tower. On top of the tower was none other than Team Rocket, who proceeded to instantly throw off their black arachnid disguises and reveal themselves, stating their motto and stating their plan to capture the Chinchou. Team Rocket planned to do this by pressing a button that was supposed to fire a missile that would release a net to capture all the Chinchou. However, when Meowth went to go press the button, nothing happened. He tried to hit it multiple more times, but still, nothing happened. Massively frustrating Team Rocket. With Daiso, Ash and the gang, and Dayton seeing that Team Rocket were obviously distracted and their plan wasn't working, they took the time to run away back across the bridge, although only Daiso, Misty, Brock, and most of the Chinchou were going to go back, as Ash and Dayton, along with Dayton's Bright, were going to stay behind and deal with Team Rocket. Dayton's father, Misty, and Brock all oblige, and Dayton blows the whistle to command all the Chinchou to come with him. So, all the Chinchou begin going back across the bridge as well, just as Ash and Dayton wanted. However, only half of the Chinchou could get across the bridge before Team Rocket was actually able to fire off the missile, since Meowth had slammed the button so hard that it broke. The missile then flies over the bridge and deploys a net, entrapping the entire bridge. Due to the force that the net applied to the bridge, due to how fast it was launched out of the missile, the net pulled the bridge out of the ground by removing the bridge's posts, and as a result, the net and bridge fell into the water below. Jessie was very angered, as the net had obviously failed to capture any Chinchou, as there was no Chinchou on the bridge when the net was deployed. So she orders James and Meowth to help her capture the Chinchou without the help of a net, and instead just grab as many as they can as they charge toward the remaining Chinchou. However, they're stopped in their tracks as Ash's Pikachu blasts them off by using Thunderbolt, assisted by Bright, who used Thunder Wave to paralyze Team Rocket first so they would stop moving. Due to the bridge being destroyed, this now meant that Ash, Dayton, and the other half of the Chinchou and Bright couldn't make it across the bridge. So Dayton's father and Brock and Misty told them that they should try and find another way across the river, and Dayton, Brock, Misty, and the other half of the Chinchou would continue on the regular path after the bridge. Dayton's father then adds that Ash should make sure that he stays with Dayton, since he was worried that Dayton would end up getting lost. However, Misty and Brock rebutted by teasing Ash, stating that Ash would only help Dayton get lost, like he had helped Brock and Misty get lost to Blue Lagoon in the first place. Ash was annoyed by this, but assured Dayton's father that he would stick with Dayton anyways, and promised to not get him lost. So, with that, Ash and Dayton backtracked to try and find another way to meet up with Brock, Misty, and Dayton's father. But while they were searching, the Chinchou got extremely tired, along with Bright, because of the long journey. Thankfully, Dayton remembers how all of the townsfolk had poured water on the Chinchou to prevent them from getting tired along the way, so he suggests that they needed to pour water on the Chinchou now, but he didn't know how to do that, since they didn't have any water with them. This led Ash to send out his Totodile, and told him to use water gun on the Chinchou. Totodile understandably misinterprets what Ash meant, and goes to spray the Chinchou by attacking them. However, Ash stops him in his tracks, and clarifies that he meant that he wanted Totodile to use water gun in the air to spray water on them to make the Chinchou healthy again. Totodile finally gets the idea, and obliges, spraying water in the air, creating a rain-like effect that hits the Chinchou, and as a result of all this water, the Chinchou are now healthy again, being so healthy that their antennas began to glow. Dayton then thanked Ash for his assistance, as he and Ash, along with all the Chinchou now, continued on their way, when they eventually come across a mountain pass. Since it was now nighttime, Ash and Dayton could barely see where they were going. Well, that would be the case if the Chinchou were not there, since with their antennas being lit up, they provided light for Ash and Dayton to see their way through. Unfortunately, Dayton was so focused on looking at the way ahead of him that he wasn't watching where he was stepping, so as a result, he stepped on a loose rock, causing it to break and causing him to fall down into the valley below the mountain pass. Ash rushes to the edge of the mountain pass and screams down into the valley, calling out for Dayton. However, Dayton doesn't respond, as he had been knocked out by this point. So, Ash decides to go back through the mountain pass with the Chinchou and continue searching there, thinking that maybe Dayton would land in the valley and then find a way back up to the mountain pass. However, Dayton couldn't do this even after he woke up from his fall. Not only because there was no way from the valley back up to the mountain pass, but also because he couldn't even move, because his knee was bruised and his leg was injured as well. To make matters worse, it began to rain heavily in the valley, leaving Dayton unable to do anything, as he could just sit and wait, hoping that Ash would come rescue him. He tried to call out for Ash, like Ash had tried to call out for him, but Ash was too far gone by this point, so he didn't hear the yell. Despite Ash not hearing Dayton's yell, Ash was continuing to yell as he searched through the mountain pass, although he soon stopped as he noticed that Bright was now walking away, therefore leading the rest of the Chinchou with him. Ash decided to follow, not wanting to lose the Chinchou, and unbeknownst to him, Bright and the other Chinchou were currently walking to Dayton through a path to the valley, as Bright had sensed Dayton. As Bright and the Chinchou approached Dayton, he heard the sounds of their footsteps and their cries, and he then saw the light that they were emitting from their antennas, so he ran towards them, and eventually he met back up with Bright, the Chinchou, and Ash. Hugging Bright immediately, very happy to see him again. Ash and Dayton, along with the Chinchou, then continue their journey, as morning arrives and the rain stops, but in its place, fog appears right as Ash and Dayton enter a forest. Ash and Dayton were concerned about the fog, however, the Chinchou weren't, as they merely used their antenna lights to guide Ash, Dayton, and the rest of the Chinchou through the forest. And eventually, after coming out of the forest, Ash, Dayton, and the rest of the Chinchou spotted the beach, thanks to the glowing antennas of the other Chinchou, which had been lit up by the rain last night, where Dayton's father, Brock, Misty, and the other half of the Chinchou already were. Before Ash and Dayton can even reunite with Brock, Misty, and Dayton's father, the two halves of the Chinchou were very eager to reunite, so they began running to each other. But because of this, both halves of the Chinchou arrived at the middle of the beach, where a pitfall trap was dug, and all the Chinchou fell in, creating a huge cloud of dust. While the dust was still there, Team Rocket showed up and took the opportunity to capture all the Chinchou in a cage from their Meowth balloon. Yes, that's right, Team Rocket had dug this pitfall trap, having already arrived at the beach somehow, and now they had captured the Chinchou, just as they planned. The dust finally clears, allowing Ash and the gang, Dayton and Dayton's father, to spot Team Rocket in their balloon, but not for long, as James then sends out his Weezing and has it use smokescreen to block the view yet again so Team Rocket could escape. Even as the smoke filled the area, though, Pikachu didn't give up, as it tried to use Thunderbolt on Team Rocket's Meowth balloon, but because of the smoke, it couldn't see, so the Thunderbolts all missed. This allows Team Rocket to begin flying away with the Chinchou, and Dayton panicked, as he couldn't see the Chinchou in their cage, so he didn't know where the Meowth balloon had went off to. Suddenly, though, he got the idea to have the Chinchou use their antennas, so he ordered Bright, along with all the other Chinchou, to shine their antennas extremely high, and this caused a huge light that was able to seep through the smoke, so that Ash and the gang and Dayton could see the Chinchou again. So, Ash then sends out his Totodile and Bayleaf, and has his Totodile shoot a water gun to break a hole through the smoke, so that Ash and the gang and Dayton could have a clear shot at the cage. However, when Bayleaf then follows up with a Razor Leaf in an attempt to break the cage, the leaves don't work. Ash panics, but Dayton assures Ash that there was a way that the Chinchou could free themselves. So, he orders all the Chinchou to use Thunder Wave, which created an electrical wave that was strong enough to break the cage, freeing the Chinchou. As they fall into the ocean, much to Team Rocket's shock, with Dayton explaining that the Chinchou were able to do this by charging up their electric attacks with Thunder Wave, and added that now their other electric attack, Spark, would be amplified because of this. So, Dayton then has his freed Chinchou, along with all of the other Chinchou, use this amplified Spark, and with the help of Pikachu's Thunderbolt, which Pikachu could now use since the smoke was gone, Team Rocket were sent blasting off. Due to already being in the ocean, all of the Chinchou then go further in and begin floating away, signifying the end of their journey. However, Dayton's Chinchou Bright returns to the beach, as it didn't want to separate from Dayton just yet, even if it meant that it would fail to go on its journey. Although Dayton was hesitant, he told his Chinchou to go anyways, telling him that he had to go on this journey, and reassuring him that he would be alright, and Dayton and Bright would remain friends no matter how far apart they were. Bright was still hesitant, not wanting to go, but before Bright could try and make his way back onto the beach fully, a wave swept him up, essentially forcing him to go into the ocean. Dayton called out to Bright that he was sure he would see him again, eventually, with Ash agreeing with Dayton, and this was enough to make Bright decide to stay out in the ocean with the rest of the other Chinchou, as they all went deep into the ocean, and the glowing antennas disappeared, since they had gotten too far. Dayton wishes Bright all the best, as he, Ash, Brock, Misty, and his father walk off the beach. Meanwhile, as for Team Rocket, they had blasted off into the ocean, and were simply floating there, waiting for assistance, not wanting to drown. Team Rocket then come across all the Chinchou in the ocean, although they get excited since they only saw the Chinchou's bright lights, so they assumed that it was a rescue boat or something. So they excitedly tried to hop on the lights, only to find that it was the Chinchou, and since the Chinchou didn't like their antennas being touched, they sparked Team Rocket, surprisingly just leaving them in pain, not blasting them off. Back with Ash and the gang, Dayton and Dayton's father, with the Chinchou parade now complete, Dayton and his father escorted Ash and the gang to Bluefinland, where they then hopped on the ferry there to Yellow Rock Island, the closest of the main World Cup islands. Ash and the gang then say their goodbyes to Dayton and Dazo, waving as the ferry departs, with Ash promising to have a battle with Dayton the next time Ash and the gang were in Blue Lagoon. Just as the ferry was taking off, Misty then spotted a lone Corsola sitting on a wave barrier, and she immediately tried to jump off of the ferry to go and catch it. However, Ash and Brock stopped her from doing so, making Misty pissed off. However, this was obviously the best call, as Misty would have missed the ferry otherwise.